Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Terrain Studio. I'm your host, Sean Morris. Today on the Terrain Studio, it's day 9 and final day of the Kashyyyk Project. That is final day that we're going to do these live videos in this particular format. After this, we'll shift over everything to the patrons. We'll give them some exclusivity in this, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed the last 9 days. I think we've logged about 11 or 12 hours here in the last few, and we'll log a couple more today. We are going to be working a little bit more on scratch building today. I sort of laid out the barricade wall. Effectively, it's a seawall at this point, and so I've laid it out in various stages, and we're going to kind of work through a couple aspects of that, and I'm going to kind of show you the stages that I got up to, at least a prototype piece, and then we'll conceptually walk through the rest of that. We'll talk about what's going to happen in terms of the next coming weeks, and so if you are interested in following the project, you certainly can do so. Sorry to tease you, I didn't want to drop one day and then say, hey, we're shifting everything. So my compromise was 9 days of free viewership and content to sort of bait that hook, if you will, or basically give you a better deciding factor whether you would want to continue with it. So hopefully the latter is not the applicable piece, and the start of that of our interest level is just peaking here now within these 9 days. So what we're going to work on today is, as I said, scratch building, but let's just quickly recap here. We have, let me pop this up on screen, Bernard checking in from Ottawa, Ontario. So please let me know if you are in chat, and it's always fun to have you guys pop up on screen, and I know who's back each day. So just a quick recap here before we get started on today. On day 1, pretty much awesome. That's cool. Trenches. Yes, Bernard. You know what? I actually logged off yesterday, and I completely was remiss that I didn't get back to that, and I had fully jotted that down on my phone, set a reminder to talk about that. So we will talk about that, and if not, just keep pinging me until I get to it. So thanks, Mr. Bob Shadow, for checking in for the first 40 minutes. That is fantastic, and we'll pop that up there. Checking in from Bloomington, Indiana. Awesome. So day 1, we worked on finishing up the huts, just getting that formation in so that we had them for spacing. Day 2, we cut some foam substrate and laid out the base of the table. On day 3, we did some scratch building, just some concept stuff. We're going to do more of that today, but it's going to be a little bit more conducive to what we've been working on the last several days. On day 4, we laid out the beach layout, cut in the contours, and laid the actual shoreline in. On day 5, we got the barrier wall layout done. We did a template and cut some foam for that. On day 6, we laid in the barrier wall by layering up that and actually carving in the contours using the Proxon foam cutter for that. On day 7, we did some continuation of that. We laid in the plastic card and got those formations laid in, that sort of base substrate that we were working from. On day 8, we did some ground formations, laid those in yesterday. That's kind of on the back half, and showed you the contours both leading up to and away from the shore and the barricade wall. And then today we are actually going to work on some wall construction and start building in the buttresses. I'm going to talk a little bit about and share the conceptual drawing that I'm working from, artwork, I should say, and sort of talk to you how I incorporated the look of this into the design that we have here. So that being said, let's pop that image up. So, whoops, that is not the one I wanted. Let's use the more refined image. There we go. Let's get rid of that other one. Go away. There we go. So this is what we're actually going to work on. And so if you pay attention to these sort of gray struts, these ones running vertically up, you'll notice that there's 2 sets of pipes here, and then they sort of like angle up, and then there's 2 smaller pipes there. There's a little bit of a catwalk or sort of an adjoining piece between those, and if not in this image here, but on the bottom, there's a little bit of a sloped edge coming down, and it sort of like almost creates the locks for that. Now, this wall is rather large, and so you can see just off to the right-hand side a guy for scale. And so I'm going to really scale this down and sort of make a mini version of this, but I really do like conceptually like that idea, and I like the idea of having that sort of that recession wall there that allows the water as it comes in to be sort of brought inland, and as it comes out or needing to be blocked, that storm surge, if you will, from the beach. So I'm going to work that into the actual design, and so that's what we're going to work on today. So today, let me swap the microphone. I just have us working under the close cams on both accounts. So I have one here that you can see sort of the wall in the background, and then I work primarily under the camera today so you guys can see what's going on there. Concept here, we'll work under that, and I got picture-in-picture for you. And I have the reverse version of that as well. So I'm just going to swap these microphones back. There we go. And yeah, so then we'll get into that and we'll start working our way through, and hopefully we'll get a couple buttresses at least in part built, and you can kind of see where I've got. I'll walk you up from concept to where I am currently, and then we'll sort of walk through. We won't adhere anything or attach anything today, but that will all come down the road. And I think the wall will start to look pretty good here before too long. So let's shift over and get underneath the camera and start doing some work. So I'm just going to migrate over here. Hopefully you guys can hear me on the microphone. I'll bring my pad over so that we can do some working. Checking in from St. John, New Brunswick. Welcome, Aaron. Let's pop that up on the screen too so people can see that. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so what have we done? So since I left last time, I sort of walked through the concept of how I wanted the wall to be. And so I'll be perfectly honest, I just started with a paper version. And the wall itself, as you know, sort of comes here and sits and fills this void. And I wanted to sort of bring those striations up through. And so in doing that, I wanted to have a little bit, we talked a little bit about using those tubes. Now, when I left yesterday, while I did use this in terms of the size, when I left yesterday, I got thinking about, okay, well, how do I join the top portion? How do I change it from this to this? And I realized that it would be rather difficult for me to plastic card out this by itself, and I was a little worried about the rigidity of it in terms of having to run the pipes through. So I moved away from this in terms of the base structure, but I did keep that sizing in mind. And then from there, what I did is I transposed this over onto a piece of foam. And then I actually, so something like this, and I just cut out a crude shape that was similar in size. And this again fit onto the wall and was working. I then want to create that angle piece, so then I did that, and I cut a version that looked like this. And so now we've sort of progressed. And then you'll see that I thinned down this portion. Now, this is obviously the most delicate and fragile. However, it is going to back against the wall right here. So we'll have some strength within that. So, perfect. I missed you there, Jace. Let me grab that first. Perfect. All right, Jace checking in from 15 minutes away from my house. So, and yet we still can't visit. So, but welcome. So we thin this out, and that's going to then start forming the frame for the piece. Now, the real tricky bit is getting the actual pipes to fit through, and how is that going to work? Because just putting them in here and then bending them, I'm actually going to probably ream out the hole and displace it and start making it quite loose and not having a nice fit in there. So that's a problematic in its own right. And so how was I going to strengthen that up? And I decided that plastic card was going to be the solution for that. So what I next did, and let me just pull this sample apart here just so I can show you in full context. What I next did was started to create a shell, if you will, for the foam. And so you can see here the foam inserts in there. It just has a hard shell now on either side. Then what I did is I start measuring in where the holes were going to go. You'll see, I'll show you progressively how I get those up. The real trick, to be honest, is getting the holes to align from side to side. And so getting them to sort of stay parallel this way is rather challenging. because if it's off by a little bit and you get this sort of downward slope, you can imagine the next one's even worse, and so on and so on. And so I really need to work hard on trying to keep them parallel, and there's 4 that go through there. Now, you remember yesterday we talked about what pipe we were going to use. I've just put a little bend in this one as I was working my way through. So this was the larger pipe here, and so we decided we were going to do 2 of those and 2 smaller ones. This is hollow, bends easier. This is solid so that it doesn't break. Getting the 404 when I try to open your Patreon. I guess if you just, sorry about that code name. I'm not 100% sure what's going on with that. It definitely 100% is active. If you just want to connect afterwards, or maybe just go search, Google search it, you can probably find it that way. I do appreciate you trying to find that. So Bernard asking, wondering if you're using a 3D printer and how much of it. I can see some of the bits that are repetitive. What is the context? If you have 5, use foam, 20 pieces, foam or 3D. So I'm using 0. On this build, I'm not going to use this particular part of the build. I'm using no 3D printing. In fact, I probably will use no 3D printing for almost all of this build, to be perfectly honest. I want a scratch build. I want to put myself through the challenge, and I want it to be super unique. I will use some 3D printed Kashyyyk barricades, just because the architecture of them is particularly unique, and I want to capture that, and I have those already. But no, this will all be redundantly made, and yes, it will be quite a bit of work, but we'll find some efficiencies as we worked through here. So let's have a look and see how the process goes. So and codename, let me know if you can Google search that. That's interesting that you can't find it that way. So, or how it's giving you an error. So what we're going to do next is, like I said, we're fitting these pipes through, and I'm just going to show you kind of a joining to another piece. And so that goes through there, it works nicely, goes through here. And then what this actually does is, as we need to bend and pull on this, it's going to put the pressure on the plastic card and not the foam. And so we're not going to have any damage to the hole because we have that on either side. So we have some strength and rigidity within that. The other 2 are going to run up through here. So we'll just feed those through real quick. There we go. Obviously there's no adhesive on any of this. And so that's now fed through there. This is what we're going to get to when we're finished, and effectively all I've done here, and I haven't quite finished the top, so I'm going to show you that, is I've just added a slightly thinner layer of plastic card. I haven't done the back, and I just put that over the front. Okay, fair enough. Jace, can you just pop the, if you don't mind, can you just pop the link right in the chat, and you just copy and paste that, so that would work for him. Thank you for that. Yeah, so we just done a facing here. This is more for the attachment of the rest. There's going to be kind of a V shape, sort of facade put in here. Then there's a little like sort of diamond shape cut in here, and we'll put that in, and that will all be done with subsequent layers as well. And so we'll get this really kind of unique adornment on the outside, and it'll be kind of cool. Now, when we feed 2 of these together, let's just try to do this for you there, and then of course it gets a little trickier. So here's some pitter patter running upstairs. I'm just going to feed this other one through. There we go. Just a little stiff, which is the way we would want it to be, because it will be a lot more rigid if it doesn't have a lot of play between them. So that is what kind of 2 of them would look like together. Now, working on the spacing, 4 or 6 inches, I'm not 100% sure what we want to do there, but we'll work on that. Let me just swap over the camera for a second to the other view so you guys can see this a little bit more in the distance. And so you can kind of see that I've laid in some of those and how they're going to work. I move this out of the way, and this one gets laid in right here, and then this one joins up with it here. Although it's not around the curvature yet, you can kind of see what that's going to do. It's going to create that sort of look, that one that we had Yeah, little Wookie, exactly. The little Wookie's supposed to be sleeping. And so we'll have that look along the top. And what we're going to then do is put in the bottom portion. So what I thought about doing is putting in a floodgate down here because I thought, hey, what better place to have the actual floodgate coming in. So this portion right here, this open portion that we kind of created, we'll put the floodgate in there. So we're going to use an actual gate and put that in. The rest of this we'll just kind of have plain Jane, and then down here a little mini version of it without the piping. So we'll have this down here. What we might do is just run a pipe maybe along the top, just below that rail. Again, there's going to be rock there, right? So we want to kind of sell that look that this is some sort of like fluid structure that either carries or transports water in and out. We're going to run it along the outside here as well, just to give the outside of the table a little bit of a cool visual aspect. And then we'll run that along the backside. And I think what I'll do is maybe another mini version of the gate there on the backside. So when we have this on here, let me just stretch this out just a little bit more, and we'll put it, we're going to put it roughly at, I got playing around with sizing here, and if we put it at roughly about 5 inches, and this one were to go here, and what's going to happen is it's going to adhere, and then we're going to have to put a really stiff bend into this. And so I'm going to just torque this considerably. Once this is glued on with the contact cement, it's going to have a lot of tension and torque into it, and we will be able to bend and adhere that. Let me show you what that looks like in the overhead, just to give you a visual of that. So when this goes onto the table, we're going to be able to put that torque, that bend in the piping, and you can see that they stay in unison with each other. And so as long as we have that strong adherence to the barricade wall, we'll be able to do that. And what we'll probably end up doing is attaching these first, making sure they're nice and solidified, and then actually feeding through the pipe. It's going to be a lot easier to do that one at a time, and then we can actually create a little bit of heat into the pipe itself, and then work that in. So heat it up with the heat gun, make sure not to melt it, and then feed it in, and then let the actual tension of the piece be taken up by each support, as opposed to trying to put it all in. It's like trying to bend like 4 rods at the same time when one is easiest to bend at a time, and then each one will actually, as they cool and solidify, will actually add strength to putting in each subsequent one. So by the time we get to these small ones on the top, it'll be very easy to put in. But hopefully you guys sort of get the look for that. Just jumping back to that main screen there, so you can see that image, and there it is, right? That's those. Let me just throw a pick and pick up here. That's kind of that piping that we're going to work our way towards. So that's where we are today, and I'll give you a recap at the end, kind of like where we got. And so as we jump off to the content in the coming weeks, you guys will know what it is I'm working on. So let's go ahead and set that aside. I'm not sure which camera is easiest for you guys to see, but let me just move to overhead, and you guys can let me know from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to work our way up through, because we have to do some gluing at various stages, and I thought in the interest of speeding it along, I would do each subsequent step. So I don't think I'm going to show you too much about the foam cutting. As I said, it went from paper template, then we just cut out a crude shape, and then we thinned it down and then angled the top. And so we have just a bunch of these now, just redundant pieces that we're going to work from. In the front, I have a smaller version. I didn't do anything with those, but those will be similar in shape, minus they won't have the same angle at the top or the piping. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over and start cutting the pieces that are going to go on the side. Now it's a little bit tricky, and I'll tell you why. This is 1 mil, by the way, the exact same stuff that we used for the retaining wall. It's a little bit tricky because when you go to set it on here, you have to really try to align it with the edges. And the part that creates the most problem is this, because as you can see, I can flex this in or out, and that really changes the thickness. So what I might suggest doing is taking the thinnest portion of this and actually using one sort of known side. and that just creates a little bit of an easier way of measuring it. Again, I'm using my square here to help me press and keep this sort of pressed in as much as possible. We'll certainly sand and trim. That's going to be an inevitable conclusion, but we'll get in here and I'll try to keep my head out of the way as much as possible. And so just drawing in crude pencil lines, this is going to give us a rough formation of where we're going to cut. Trying to keep our pencil as sort of tight in as possible so we don't have to cut too many times, trim too many times. There we go. So then that just translates into, I know it's a little harder to see this line, but then what we're going to do is we're just going to cut out this initial shape here. So let's grab our other ruler, got a nice sharp knife. We'll maybe actually just switch blades just so that I can start this one with a nice fresh blade. Both of those are probably still usable for many things, but I will swap them out later. All right, so what I'm going to do, in the interest of not wasting a bunch of material and just sort of cutting across here, I'm going to try to trim this as close to the actual shape as possible. So I'm just going to go in here and start a score line. Go. So not cutting all the way through by any means. Come back over here. We still got lots of play with this too, in terms of there's lots of opportunities for us to account for any, like, oh, it's a little too thin here or not enough there, because we're going to be adding so many more layers to this wall. These are just the first part. This wall is really going to be a focal feature of this build. Just because it's going to take up so much space, and it's going to be one of those ground level like elements that's not going to be green, and so it's really going to draw the eye. So the water will draw the eye, the wall will draw the eye, and certainly the sand will draw the eye. So we'll want to pay a lot of attention to those elements. I'm just going to cut here at the bottom. Just sort of scoring along that. I'm just scoring everything because we're going to do a snap on all this, just to break it apart. All right. So snapping this gets our corner. Then what we're going to do is we're going to snap that and then back. We're going to come in and then try to, I think we have to cut that one. All right, we'll snap this. There. We'll come in here, walk this down, snap it back, and then the bottom. Go. We'll clean up any little loose bits if we need to. We're going to sand this down considerably when we work our way through it anyway. So any little flashing I'm not overly concerned with. Okay, so now we just go back and just check that against our sort of blank. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, it's gonna do the trick, and we'll sand that off. So now what we're going to do is just mark this off as A and A, and we'll know that we put those two together. It's quite important because if there's any variation between this side, I don't know what there would be, but you know, it's best to make sure you're measuring from the side that you're actually going to apply the piece onto. So now we get into this like weird scenario where I'm actually going to measure this side, and it's like, oh, it doesn't quite fit here. What am I going to measure? I want to continue using these pieces, and because I'm going to be doing so much sanding in terms of making sure it fits properly, I feel comfortable enough in the fact that I can work it close enough that I can then rely on the trimming later. So I'm gonna just measure that off. I have lots of this material, but I'm just saying that you don't need to grab a new sheet just because you have lots of cuts. Like, don't be afraid to make the cuts. If you are, then you want to start from like a squared edge every single time, then you probably will use more material. But there's nothing wrong with that. That just gives you peace of mind. I'm just effectively just measuring it. I'm going to cut it right out of there. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, cool. So Bernard, tell me your question again. You wanted to know World War I trenches versus sort of trenches that will be on which will be like Mumbai, and then you wanted to know about versus trenches that were on what planet were we talking about? Remind me again what planet we're talking about. I think we were talking about the ones in whatever the salt world was. The names escaped me for a second here, and how I would go about doing them. I think for me, or Hoth, I guess would also be applicable. I think for me, no matter what, the first question I would ask is, do you care about the modularity? Oh, perfect, Bob. You're going to be here an extra hour. Awesome, fantastic. Well, that's great. Hang out with us as much as possible. I appreciate that. And Codename, I'm not sure if you're still hanging out, but let me know if that worked for you, if you're able to find it. So if I was going to build trenches, the thing that I would make the biggest factor for me, the biggest consideration, first and foremost, would be, am I required, or am I attempting to make the pieces modular? Do I want to move this trench system around? Do I want to change configurations? Do I want to be able to have it on or off a table at times? And in which case, if I was going to do that, then the construction process would be entirely different. In fact, I think you're going to take up more real estate to make a trench like that look realistic, because you're going to want to have a natural flow up to and away from. If I was going to build trenches myself, because I'm not really a super big fan of all modular terrain, I would most certainly build them into my table, and I would most certainly do similar to what I did here and start with a foam substrate and build myself up a layer of foam. What level do you want to go to depends on how deep you wanted to make your trenches. I'm thinking that 1.5 inches is probably pretty good. Anything, I think 1 inch is probably too short. This would be 1 inch here. If you can look in the top photo, so this is 1 inch here. This would be 1.5 inches here, so they'd be, this is 2.5 inches here, so that's too deep. And then 1.5 would be this secondary layer here, which I think is probably the most reasonable. Okay, so then crate, yeah, sorry, that was the one I was thinking of. So Hoth and crate trenches are dug in, yes, and Mumbai, which are like World War I, are reinforced, yes, got it. They're much more of an elaborate system. If you wanted to and you were looking to maintain modularity, you would want to go something wide, and the reason being is that you want to have this realistic flow up to. One of the things that you could do if you wanted to really sell the look, I think, let me just use this piece of plastic card here to draw a quick diagram, is that you could actually sell the look by doing this. Have your front leading edge of your trench here, and that would be your ground and whatever debris or stuff you wanted to put in front. This being your trench line, and you could just have the open back, and so you'd have the illusion of this being a trench, but not have to add in the flow of the back portion here. So it's effectively a trench front here. Your guys would be able to stand here, face this direction. You'd have a natural flow to the front, and then you could have an open trench system. And then if you were to make your design, you could have I'm just gonna draw on this side now, you could have a piece, let's say a straight trench here, and that would be your trenches. Then you could do an angle piece like this. You could do another straight piece like this. And so this would be the direction that the enemy would come, like this. And then your portions, modular portions, you could just connect together and be on this backside or whatever configuration you wanted. not having a backside to it does maybe drop the illusion a little bit, but it does shrink down the amount of real estate that you would actually need for that. Flames of War does the opposite. Yeah, that's 100%. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is that their trench system is very similar to what I just described, right? So I'm not really a fan of the look, because I think that the in-ground look is much more appealing, because that way you actually gain the advantage of having your troops lower, and so less visible, all that sort of stuff. You can actually have a different play space as well. You have both an up and down play space, and I think that lends a little bit better. So if I was going to do it, I would not do modular pieces. I would do an in-ground. Now, does that translate into more terrain? Yes. Is it a little bit more static? Sure. But that is just something you could do. You could also build tops for your trenches, and so you could just basically have, you could close off the top, and you can make it look like maybe walkways or something like that, or put more walkways in, so there's a bit more playability from those. So that's something that you could consider as well. I know that comments will catch up, so I will revisit that in a second with you. All right, I'm just going to cut this piece here. Notice a little nick out of the bottom of this piece of terrain. I'm perfectly fine with that. We're going to have this against the bottom of the wall, and there's going to be a piece of foam that's going to cover it. So if you see that when I progress through here, just know that that's going to be 100% covered. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to do trenches, like, I almost feel like if you're going to do trenches, that's a pretty dedicated terrain concept. And so why not have everything on the table, surrounding that, sell the feature of the trenches. Like, I just don't see that being, I think if you're going to put that on the table, it's so specific that the look is going to only really work, pretty much thematically. And so if you did a whole table that was based around that, or thematically themed, I think you would be better off. So if it's something like, I don't know, like tree stands or something like that, you don't need to incorporate every tree stand into a table. But if you're going to do something as specific as trenches, I might just go for it. Just go for the whole modular look and feel good about it. All right, so there we go. This is going to be B side. We're going to pop that on there. Do a little trimming, and that little piece I was talking about at the bottom. If I can hold that up right there, you can see that little corners nick. That's going to be against the wall, and so the wall will be here, and that'll be 100% covered. And we'll do that sort of piece as well, and probably not on this stream, but you'll see what I mean, and we'll add those little flood channels in, and I think it'll look pretty good. Now, admittingly, the first time that I did this in terms of the prototype always seems to take infinitely longer than everything else. But I attached all these pieces, and then I did the trimming, and then I drilled the holes in. I'm not going to do it like that. I didn't do the second one like that. I come up with a much easier way in terms of aligning those holes, and so I'll show you what I did there. So yeah, okay, so 100%, I guess I was careful with the words, but I think that if you're just going to build modular trenches that add on top of a table, it's just going to look like you built pieces to throw on any table and not built pieces to be a table, if I were going to more strongly word that. Okay, so I'm just lining this up and just figuring out how much trimming and things that I need to do. It's not going to be a lot, to be perfectly honest. A little bit here at the bottom, a little nick there, probably sand that off. And so because I don't need to do a lot of trimming, I'm going to just progress to the next stage of this. And so what I want to do is I want to line these pieces up so that I can get them to be aligned for drilling the holes. And so I'm just trying to figure out which is the best element to align, and I think what I'm going to do is align the bottoms of these. There we go. Perfect. So I'm aligning the two pieces together, and now what I want to do is I want to tape that together. I'm just going to grab my roll of tape, which I have conveniently placed on the other side of the room. Let me grab it. Okay, so now that we have that piece cut, we're going to, or these two pieces cut, we're going to just tape off, or tape them together rather. And this is just going to help us to keep them aligned for the drilling portion. So we're going to go ahead and tape that together. We can tape the majority of the bottom here because there's not going to be any piping going through here. We're just trying to keep everything aligned as best we can. Just trying to line up these two pieces. We got a little bit of a, and every piece is going to be a bit different. So that will be just because we are hand cutting everything, but I think we're okay for the most part on both of these. That's going to be fine. And that one's going to go there. It's going to be fine. Yeah, we'll give that a go. We'll see. We'll see how it ends up. If I do any corrections, I can certainly do that. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm just going to peel this tape back a little bit. Okay. So when I set up the, well, that's really convenient. When I set up the design for where I wanted the holes to be, I sort of just used some known measurements, and by that I just used some existing pieces. So to create the holes that we're going to do here, what I did for the very first one was I put my plastic card down, and I was like, you know what, I want the first hole to be along this, about that high up, and so I just picked that point and I drew that line across. The other one I said I want to have it in line with the bottom piping, so that would be just inside the wall top, and so I just drew that line across here. So these measurements aren't going to mean anything to you, and that's why I'm not really spending a lot of time showing you. This is just how I sort of went out and sort of triangulated the position for this. So first one, I'm going to make the first hole here, and then I figured out, oh, what distance do I want to go up from there? And for that, I went up 7/16 of an inch. I believe is what I used. And that actually just got me to the top of the knuckle, or where that piece goes across. And so I'm gonna do my best to draw a line across there, square it up. And again, I'm not overly concerned about the precision of all of this. It's going to be a little bit, it's going to come out in the wash because it's going to be such a big feature that off by a millimeter here or there is not going to be the make or break. So that got us 2 points. Then the next point that I did was I created another line using this same quantity. You can see that sort of, there we go. You tip it that way. It sort of goes through the center of that. Likewise, when I put this down, that goes through the center of that hole. And so that's what I was doing, just sort of creating these measurements that rather than have to physically measure anything like remember numbers, with the exception of the 7/16, which actually is another reference point. I just know the measurement of that. All I have to do is just grab these sticks, put them on there, and it's really easy for me to draw in the lines. Figure out the camera there. There we go. So I'm just drawing in those lines. Next, I have to draw a line of like where the 2 small holes went. And so for that, what I did is I went from this bottom point here, this bottom corner, to this top corner, and I made my first measurement along there. Oops. drawing that. And then my next one, I went down half an inch, which just bisects with another line, 2, 4, 6, 8, and did another one just there. And so that ended up being my four points. Next, what I did is I took, first I'm going to take my knife and I'm just going to put a pinhole with the knife tip right into these points. And from there, what I'm going to do is just give it a little twist to put an indentation. So then I can drop my pin vise in and I can start putting in my first hole. So I'm going to go here. And because we have the two lined up, in theory, we're hoping that we get through these pieces relatively straight, and so that we can then have two holes that are lined up. And that is our theory. And so the knife hole just gives me a nice index point. Just want to hold them together. If they start to delaminate a little bit, that's just where the tape isn't added. So there we go. So I'm just gonna drill these holes all the way through. You can kind of see that. There we go. This one I didn't quite punch all the way through. There we go. Okay, so now we have 4 pinholes done through, and they are redundant on the backside, and they should be pretty close in alignment to those. So I think we're fairly accurate on the hole size is not correct though. So we'll make sure that we get that taken care of. So then what I did is I moved on progressively through the next stages. And so I'm going to use these various sizes. If you're interested in the sizes, I can certainly tell you them. My drill box is over there. So effectively, though, the way to figure it out is I want to work my way up to 3/16 of an inch, which this guy is. And then I want to work my way up to, on the other ones, up to 2 millimeter. And so I just basically have a 2 millimeter one here, and I'm gonna walk the other ones up to the 3/16. So I am gonna use the drill for this. Now, let me just caution that you can also do it by hand, or if you have a pin vise, that's fine. And you can make the holes, you can ream the holes out. The only thing I'm gonna suggest here is that you go slow. It probably will be a little bit louder on the microphone, and make sure that you are as straight up and down as possible, and you don't want to tear the plastic card. So I'm just going to start the holes through. And then once you get through, you can put a little bit more speed. I'm actually going to drill this right into the wood because I can get a little bit further through. And I'll show you each stage as we go. So there we have that. They're nice and clean. You can see both sides nice and clean. No tearing or anything like that. We'll drop this off. We'll go to the next size up. Let's go through those. So far so good. Next size up. I use the MDF piece underneath because I can drill, and then once I start to see a little bit of the MDF come up, I know that I'm all the way through. It's a nice visual indicator. Saves me having to put holes in my cutting mat, but it is actually a really nice visual reminder of when I have I've sort of permeated the other side. Okay, last one. Again, really slow. And the larger you go, obviously, the less and less material you have around it, so you need to be careful. And then we'll swap this out one more time. We're going to go down considerably in size. We're going to go down to the 2 millimeter here, just to do those other holes. Okay. So now we have those done. So let's just go to our rods that we have here and just do a little bit of a test fit. And we'll just see if we have achieved the correct sizing. These 2 millimeter ones are actually the trickiest ones to get through because they bend the most. So I might just ream the hole out a little bit from the other side. Even a little spur on the inside will prevent them from going in. There we go. And last. Just about there. There we go. Okay. So that is them fed through there. Let me just give that a little bit of a twist. And so we know that the holes are aligned, and now what we need to do is we need to align them on the other side of a piece of foam. So we'll pull those back out. That's just for a visual demonstration. And let's get into laying it down onto the actual piece of foam. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to grab the tape back off. Get rid of that. And then we're going to align these sides back here. And we want to get those holes aligned as much as possible. So here's where we're going to have the opportunity to, oh, hey, this one's got to go up a little bit, down a little bit. We know the holes can align. We just have to play that visual game of like, oh, are they physically aligned? Is that going to be, and I think we're going to be pretty darn close on that. So what we'll do now is we'll get our contact cement. We'll layer this on. While that's setting up to dry, I'll show you how to do the sheeting over the top of this one so we don't have any delays. So let's just open this up, pull that off. For this, I'm just using coffee stir, and I just apply it. It just saves having to get a paintbrush out and go wash it at this moment. So this is B side here, doesn't really matter. I'm going to apply it to both sides, but just letting you know. And I'm going to just walk that onto the foam. Now again, not making it overly thick, but I do want to get a full spread because believe it or not, these are going to be holding a lot of tension, and so I really want to make sure that that piece of plastic card is laminated very well to the side. So there we go. So then I'll just go ahead and set that aside to dry. We'll do these sides as well. And I'm okay to go right over the holes, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't matter. We'll be able to use our drill to drill anything back out if it gets plugged up or anything like that. So, and it can be on there pretty healthy as well. Same premise, right? We want to have these hold a lot of tension, and so those rods, we don't want them peeling or delaminating this at any point. We're also going to sand right to the edges, and so if it squeezes through the seams when we apply it, that's okay. That'll make sure we got a nice fit there, and then we'll sand off any of the excess goop later. Okay, so we're going to set that aside there. We'll set that over there. We'll seal that up somewhat. Set that back here. And then let's move over to this piece. So effectively this is going to go on there. That's what we're at right now. And then you're going to arrive here. We've already checked the alignment. We got everything good there. Now, this one has been sanded down, so it doesn't need really a lot of trimming along here. But if it did, one of the things you can use is just a sanding stick. This is just a medium sanding stick here, and you just run it along. Your foam's going to be your nice buffer. If you find that your foam is what's protruding, then you can actually run it back through your foam cutter. And then the plastic, as long as you have it on a low temp setting, your plastic won't get cut, and you can just run this through the foam cutter and shave that off. Another method you can use is just grab yourself, this is a 150 grit sandpaper right here. You can just flip over your piece accordingly, run it along there, and your plastic is going to be kind of like your leading edge. So if I'm running this on here and I don't see a lot of foam, then likely I'm still on the plastic. Second I start seeing foam, as long as I have it parallel to the paper, not sort of grinding down one side or the other, it will give me a nice flush look. So we're pretty flushed up on that. So we'll set that aside. This right here is half mil, so thicker than paper obviously, but certainly flexes and bends. If I were to grab let me grab another thick piece just to show you guys the difference in that. Where's my sheeting? Let me grab two other pieces here just for a visual demonstration of the differences. So this is 1.5 right here. So again, I can still flex and bend that with ease. So this is 1.5. So this is actually a bit thicker than I'm using on the actual table right now. I'm not using any 1.5, but this is the 1 mil here. This is what I work with most standardly. I like this the best. It's a good all around. It's got a lot of strength. That's actually what I did the sides with. So a lot of rigidity. And you think about it, if you add 2 mils of plastic, you laminate these two layers together, it's a pretty considerable amount of plastic. And then this is the half mil, so much thinner, still opaque, so you're still not seeing anything through it, but you can see I've got a lot more flow with this. So I can certainly get that ripple effect in here, but you can see that it doesn't move, it kind of goes in big waves. And so it's not going to bend really sharply. This stuff, however, does bend. In fact, I can actually crease this stuff here quite easily. And so that just shows you the difference of the plastic. The reason I'm just going to use this thinner stuff on the front is because I don't need to add much strength there. And another thing is I'm actually going to sand these angles. And so I want really tight fitting connections here. And so on that other one that I did already here, bring that up there, you can see sort of, there we go. You can see that bend that I was trying to get. And so the thicker the plastic card, the tougher it is to get that to align. And so that's just a little bit of goop on there. I haven't sanded this fully. So we'll layer that on, and we have these weird joints that we need to go through. And so we're gonna do that in 3 subsequent layers. So there's the difference of the half mil versus the 1 mil. And you can see kind of this shell that we've now created on this foam. The foam is strong, but the shell is actually the part that's going to be add the rigidity so that these don't pull and ream through the holes. Just to kind of get to that point that I was making about the holes, if we were to just go and sort of drill through the foam by itself, I'll just show you here real quick. I'm just going to use this as if my hand was a drill. So I got that through, no problem, but you can see that hole is not particularly nice in shape. And then as I make the piece bigger, you can see what happens on the backside. I start to punch through some of this, and then the bigger I go, if I'm just going through the foam, The hole, while staying round, it doesn't have the same sort of tightness that I would like. Now, if I run the tube through this tube, this would be the same size that we're going to use, and then I would to put the pressure on. You can see what's going to happen here. So I'm just putting about as much pressure as I did on the other one. And then let's say I have to flex it another way or whatever. I'm just manipulating it around. What gradually happens is now you can see the hole is certainly larger. It's got a little bit more shape to it, but it's actually considerably larger in size. And so if I get to this tight corner right here, you guys can see, and I bend it around like I'll need to, and then maybe this portion has to flex back, I'm just going to make the hole bigger and bigger and bigger. And so while eventually it's going to stop because I'm not going to manipulate that around, it's not going to have the same hold. And in fact, when I do the adhesion in there, I'm a little bit concerned because I actually have daylight now and I can sort of wiggle that around. You can just see how kind of wobbly that is versus this one minus these ones. But if I move this around, you can see that the rod stays primarily in the same position. And so there's not that wiggle. In fact, to pull this out, you can see the tension on that. You can see how much stronger that plastic card makes that joint. And that's the reason that we kind of do this stuff. With this real thin layer, I wouldn't have that same rigidity. So that's why I don't use that on the side. All right, so let's push this stuff aside and let's go ahead and just cut our layers for this. So I need to square up this line. I'm just going to use my cutting mat here to make sure it's quite square. I think we can get that a little bit better. So I'm just going to trim this. This is a 1/2 mil, so 2 cuts is all you ever need to get through it. Scoring, and then the next one's gonna peel it off. We're then gonna line up our piece here, and again, we don't have to be perfect with this because we're fine to sand it down later. So I'm just gonna line it up pretty close. Come on this side, draw my line that I would like to cut along. There we go. Pop my ruler over and just give that a cut. And again, you can see I'm just using a scrap, this like sort of scalloped piece, but again, keep it around because there's times when you just need small little pieces. And so now we have that flashing. We're going to then laminate that onto this piece. And then what we'll do is I'll show you how to cut either end. Now I'm gonna leave it proud on this end and on this end as well. And there's a specific reason why on this end it's most important for us to leave it a little bit proud. So for this, we're gonna contact cement, both of those as well. And then while we're sort of letting both of those dry, we'll move over to the table itself and we'll sort of conceptually work through what it is that we have going on over there and then things to come as well. All right. Any questions, of course, please feel free to fire them into chat. I will gladly answer. All right. So I'm just going to glue up the front of this, making sure I get right to the edges. Doesn't matter about the cleanliness of this because we're going to sand these things quite a bit again, and we'll clean up most of that, and then we'll add our paint and all that good stuff. So I'm not sure why I just did that top portion. I absolutely don't need to do that top portion. So I'm just going to find a piece of foam and take that off for now. All right, so we're going to do the same to this piece. And even though I said this is not really going to be like a piece that we care much about in terms of like strength or stability or anything like that, I don't want anything to delaminate at any point. And so we're just going to treat it as if it needs to be, the strongest piece on the table. And so we'll apply the contact cement the same way that we have applied it to every other piece. Notice I'm going all the way to the end on both pieces, even though I already know it's longer. That just will allow me to manipulate back and forth if I need to have to move it around at all. So, all right, so there we go on that. Okay. Great. So we've got a couple pieces drying, and then we're going to move over here and have a look at the table itself. So let me just swap cameras for a second, and I'll move one, and then we'll show you guys what we have on the table. There we go. All right, so let me just close the picture-in-picture here for a second, and I'll move this camera. Go. Perfect. All right, let's swap back to the other one. Here we go. Perfect. Let me just manipulate this a little bit so you guys get a bit more of the table. All right, awesome. Okay, so catching you up from where we were before. Remember, we laid in the pieces around here, so we got the retaining wall in. I actually cut and I might as well peel this off while I'm talking to you. I cut these yesterday. I glued them in this morning, taped them. This tape, as opposed to the other tape, we talked about yesterday, actually was purposeful, and it was just keeping that bend and holding in those pieces while they adhered to the substrate. And so we have that in. We're gonna just peel these guys off. Got a little bit of a seam delamination here at the bottom, so I need to make sure I tuck that in. I didn't put a piece of tape there this morning, clearly, so that just needs to be pressed in ever so slightly. So it will have a buttress that's going to go right over top of it, but nonetheless, we'll secure that a little bit better than it is at present. All right, so let me just peel the last of this tape up here. There. Okay, there we go. Perfect. And I'm just going to pop this whole piece. Remember, it had a little bit of contact cement on the bottom of it, so we expected it would be sticky in a few points. There we go. All right. So now we have the whole piece. Let me grab that little green tape off there. Perfect. So the piece is, looking good in terms of this is what we want it to look like. We have our retaining wall in. We have our working surface. We got nice connection points. This is the piece right here. You can see just at the bottom here. We'll want to put that in just ever so slightly. It's still tacky enough. Like I can literally just press it in and it will hold. So we'll just put a piece of tape over that. I can do that right now. It doesn't need any additional adhesive. It just needed to have a little bit more connection. So we'll just glue that back in place. So you can see the seams are pretty seamless in the sense that they're not that obtrusive. There's another one right there. So we got nice tight seams, which is always important when you're working with plastic card. So now what we're going to do, as we talked about, is we're going to attach those pieces, those buttresses, and so that's just more of those blanks. And so they're going to fit along here at whatever interval spacing we want, that 4, that 6, 5, whatever, what have you. And they're just going to fit along here. I'm just going to dry fit a few of these so you can visually see what that's going to look like. And so as I said, this is the outside of the table here, but I thought, hey, from the visual standpoint, why not sell this feature? We can add a lot of detail into that. And so then when you're looking at the side of the table, as opposed to just looking at exposed wood or sides of foam or just blacked out, it's actually going to have a real nice visual. That will tie in with the visual that will be here, which of course will be on the table itself. The backside will be no different. We'll actually have, let's see how many more of these I can grab and balance. So on the back side, we'll actually have this one probably set more there, and then this one right on the corner like we talked about, we'll tie that look in. So we'll probably offset that like that. And then again, we'll just continue with that formation, that 4 to 6 inch placements of these as we walk clean around the table. And the other two obviously or 3 are ones we're working on. So they'll go right up here. And so that will give us our look that we go around here. Our hut will set on top of here, and then we'll have a nice kind of, almost like a rampart top, right? It's almost going to look like a little bit of a fortress up here. But again, it's just tying in some of those elements that look. So again, yesterday I'll just set this over here. We got the rest of these landforms put in, and so this one is all now adhered. We have the ones on the other side as well, and so they're all tied together. Once we get the wall in terms of that base formation in, we'll get the buttresses done, we'll get the in-between sections done on that, we'll get all the plastic card work done. Then what we'll do is we'll give that a preliminary paint job, and then we're actually going to solidify that to the table. Then we're going to tie in the rock elements, the ground structures, the ground paste, and we'll bring everything. Thanks, Al. I appreciate that. I think it will look sharp when it's done. And I think every aspect going forward, you guys are really seeing these last 9 days are really kind of like, this is the real mundane work, the sort of the work that no one's ever going to see in the next stages. This is all the stuff that's like going to be glossed over in the sense that there's going to be so many more interesting things to look at. But nonetheless, you never got to the interesting things unless you did this work. So nobody cares what this hill truthfully looks like. But what's going to sell the look, and I think in the end you'll be like, oh, that does fit. And then you can ask the question about how that was done. So this is kind of the answer to how it was done. And then we'll sell the look as we go through. So typically the steps will get easier and easier and less work, although they'll yield the greatest results. So, and I always say that the more results, the better the look, it typically is a shorter step. That's just how it generally translates. The water will be a really nice feature when we're done. It's going to be really easy. We're going to mix 2 parts of epoxy resin together. We're going to pour it out and we're going to leave it to dry 3 days. And that's going to sell that look. The water is going to be achieved, but it's going to be really a low effort task. But yeah, so just getting back to all the pieces, we're going to get the wall mostly built and then add the preliminary colors on there. We won't do the final details or anything like that. We'll leave that till after, because we'll add paste and we'll get on the wall. We'll have to clean all that up and such. But we don't want to have to go in and paint every aspect of the wall, get all those nooks and crannies when it's on the table. That's going to be too hard to get the airbrush in and brush all that out, or get a paintbrush in and get kind of underneath this platform and work on that. So you'll start to see some color be added to the project as we go, but just the color doesn't mean that it's going to be the final stages. You'll have to give it a once over, and there's a lot of going to be like, add this element, fix this, tie this in. Add this, fix this, tie this. You're going to constantly be tying things in. The tree is no exception, right? Like this roof right here is just that preliminary color. The hut itself is at more of a final stage color, and you can see the color difference in that. You can see the subtle moss undertones that are laid in there, but it's not done either. It has to have the moss effects, and so we're progressively walking through each of these steps as we go. These pieces right here, the hut is not finished. What I want to do now is, let me slide this over here. You can see I have the brass etching done in there. Well, these blank brown spaces up here, what I want to do is I want to come in with some brass wire and do some like coiled decorations. I'm going to twist up wire, and I'm going to put some twisted wire in there to add the adornments on there. So because this is still too much of a blank canvas, it needs to have more elements tied in. We'll add the brass to the roof, we'll add the moss to the roof, we'll have all these pieces that we need to do. We have the door looking great, but it's not a door. There's no actual door on there yet. So we'll slide in the wood underneath these pieces. We'll put in some elements up here in the top portions to finish those off. So we have to kind of revisit, but yet we have some color on here. So the wall will be very much like that. Get the preliminary stages, get the color down on it to start it off, and then we'll work our way back. Same thing with the huts and all those things as we move forward. So that's what you have to kind of look forward to on the project. So go ahead and just loosely throw that back in place. So, all right, let's slide over and see if anything's ready here, and we'll get going again on this. I'm just going to avert your eyes for a second, because I'm just going to do this live. There we go. We'll bring it down this way. work a little bit higher this time so you guys can see a bit more of what I'm working on. All right, so we're going to, this one fell over, that's quite convenient. It still has nice adhesion. All right, this is side A, this is side B, which I think we put the glue on the wrong side, but it doesn't matter, it's the same, should be the same from side to side. So we'll go ahead and stick this guy down on here, get that strong lamination. Take this, oh, you know what, we did do that backwards, look at that, what a bonehead move. All right, so I need to, I cleverly applied the adhesive to both of the same sides and not to the other side. So I'm gonna need to actually do that. There you go. It's the troubles of working live and talking while you're doing things. So that just means that I'm gonna need to sand off this side here, and we can do that after. It's fine. Let's just quickly set that up. I knew that I wrote those letters on the side for a reason. I didn't even follow my own instructions. Happens. Nobody's perfect. I will be the first to tell you that. Happens all the time. This morning I cut a piece and I was cutting it, super proud of my first prototype, and I'm like, yep, that's absolutely backwards. It needs to be cut the other way. So, all right, we'll leave that set there. We will quickly migrate over to the other piece though, because we have time to do that. We'll go here and we'll laminate this. Oh, grab that. Ugh. Onto this. So I'm going to go ahead and set this into place. Align it as best I can. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can trim it and then just give that a press into place. So we'll give that a second to adhere. And what we want to do now is we want to end up trimming this portion and this portion. Grab that other camera angle here for you. Here we go. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to, you can see how it's like well above there. We want to trim in there, and then likewise on the bottom, we're going to trim across there as well. Let's see if I can focus that for you guys. There we go. Yeah, so that's going to be the next thing that we need to do. And I can go ahead and do that even when it's still setting up. So first and foremost, what I want to do is get a nice flat press, and then I'm going to just run my knife through, scoring it. And I'm not going to cut all the way through. I'm going to just break this one. There we go. And just break that off, and then we'll do a sand of that. But we got that flush now. Then at the top, this one's a little bit harder to show you in terms of, bring this down a little bit and see if I can show you this way. There we go. So what we're going to do now is I need to cut this portion. So the way I figured out best to do it is if I set the piece down like this, I then press my knife here, and then I follow the contour. And I actually want to cut this one on an angle. And the reason I want to cut it on an angle is when I laminate the next piece on, those two joins go together, and a little bit of sanding makes that almost a seamless piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and press that in, attempt to press it in. Just have to work really hard at getting the angle just right. It's going to bring it as close to me as I can. Just need to get this side a little bit more. It's a little bit tricky, but that's why we leave that excess there. We want to make sure we get really nice, as clean as we can anyway. And then we're going to run our sanding stick over. And you'll see that the cut itself, I'll just explain here in a second, you'll see that the cut itself won't be perfectly straight across. It's going to be, in fact, in line perfectly with the contour. So what I mean by that is you can see that there's a little bit of a high point here and a low point there. That's because it's actually perfectly aligned with this, which is what I want. So, and if I grab the adjoining piece, you'll see what I mean. When I go to fit this over, like so, this is the piece that I want to have straight. I don't care about what the underside looks like. I want to have this piece go over and align seamlessly like with that. So when I sand that off, that will be what the joint looks like right there. And that'll be aligned perfectly. So this just gets cut to be perfectly flush with that. And the reason being is that means that part of this foam on one side is slightly higher by a fraction of a millimeter than the other. And so when this piece gets cut, it's just accounting for that difference between those two. And so we'll take care of that in the next subsequent step. The last piece I have to do here is just trim along this edge. And so again, I'm going to run my knife along here, just scoring, and then I'm just going to run through the trim. It gets a little bit tricky as you get up towards the top because it's hard for the knife to get by this top, and so I might just have to come to the side, do a little bit of hand shaving. It's obviously going to come out in the sanding step, but if I can take off the bulk with a little bit of hand shaving, we'll be fine. There we go. So I'll clean this up as we're waiting for that glue to set up, and you'll see what it kind of looks like when it gets cleaned up here. So again, you can use the sanding stick or the sandpaper. It doesn't really matter. It's your choice. I will use both just to show you that they effectively achieve the same thing. Something like this on the bottom here, where it's like a little bit harder to go over the paper, I'll just use the sanding stick. There, and then something like the side here, I'll use the sandpaper. So again, just keeping it. Something like the front, great spot to use it. All right, so now you guys will see how nice and clean that is. So really clean, seamless front, seamless edge, and you'll see a little bit of the like the dirt and the debris in there. I mean, let me bring that up so you guys can just see a little bit of the glue texture in there, but you can also see how small that is. So let me grab a pencil for scale here. So we're talking very minute seams, and so really you probably can't see that mostly until you turn there, and then you can pick a bit of the dirt up, but it's pretty much a seamless piece. We'll do the same thing with this front portion as well, and so we can go ahead and cut another piece to go there. Might as well do that while we're waiting as well. And so we're going to set this down, same premise applies, get it fairly close or fairly tight. Measure off that piece as well. We want to cut it a little bit longer as we did with our other piece. So we'll go ahead and just trim this off. And we know that these pieces are usable we have to use it for redundant pieces. So cutting these strips that are this size will not be a waste. We'll just save the excess and move it on to the next one. If it's long enough, perfect. It'll be long enough for a few pieces anyway. There we go, set that aside. We're gonna align it as soon as my camera catches up. There we go. We're gonna align it here, same premise. We'll leave it long. This one will actually cut the opposite way when we're ready for that. And then we'll sand that off and we'll get that seam. So I'm just gonna go here, cut it roughly to the size we need. There we go. Grab a little bit more contact cement, keep this assembly line going. If I can remember to apply it to the right side. This one will be easy because there is no right side, but again, apply it right to the ends even though you're not going to need it. Just make sure that you have that adhesive right to the end because you don't know exactly where you're going to cut it. That's the main reason. So you don't know technically where the physical end is at this point. There we go. We go back to this guy. It's probably going to be tacked up enough. First thing we're going to need to do is sand off a large portion of that, which is fine. We can do that. Let's align this guy. So it's looking good. We're hoping that the holes are going to end up being fairly close. There we go, squeezing out the excess residue. All right, so the first things I'm going to do is take off this adhesive. Now, the nice thing about this adhesive, because it didn't get the adjoining section added, is that it's just going to roll off in like a meniscus film. So it's going to be, I'm just going to get to the high point of it, roll it. So it just sort of like creates that sort of meniscus over this like film layer over the piece. So as long as you get underneath that, you can just start rolling that off. So it's not gonna be catastrophic. I only know how to fix things because I've screwed up before. So so there we go. So we have that all back off. So that was fairly easy to deal with. We just have to give it a minute to set up the extra glue. So now what we want to do is we want to make sure and figure out if we got these holes somewhat aligned across. To do that, we're going to go and use our drill, and we're just going to poke our hole. And remember, I showed you this already. The drill can get the hole through the foam. That's not an issue to get it through. We just want to we wanted the integrity of the hole to be maintained when the piping goes through. So it's not a question of whether we can get this to work or not. I'm just going to poke these through. Really what I want to do is displace the material. I want to get that excess material moving through. There we go. Okay. And then we're going to swap sizes. So we'll do this top one. And you guys can see we're pretty, I guess it's kind of hard for you because you're on an angle, but we're pretty parallel there. You can see we're kind of moving across at a fairly straight level. Then what we'll do is we'll swap this out real quick. We don't need to do all the sizes to go up correctly. We'll just do like a couple steps up. If I can get the drill to cooperate, we'll go do a couple steps up and then we'll get right to that 3/16. Excuse me. We're just looking to move the material out of the middle. Swap that. And last but not least, let's get this last one done. Okay. So there we go. We have that done. So now in theory, I think we have 3 of these guys done. So let's see if we can put 3 in sequence here and see what this looks like. Got this one with a nasty bend in it now as I manipulated the piping. All right. So let's feed this through. There. All right, let's pop this guy on here. This one's got the wet top on it, so let's be careful of that. So you can see that manipulating this through when there's no like stationary point is far more difficult. So don't look at this as being overly fiddly. I'm basically doing it in the worst possible fashion. I'm just constantly dry fitting to sort of show you guys what this is gonna look like. So when I go to do the actual construction, I'm not as concerned that this will be super problematic. I do need to make these. Like I said, the 2mm holes are the worst because if you have any foam stuck in the channel, they're because the piping is so thin, it doesn't have a lot of rigidity to it to sort of persevere and poke the foam through. There we go. Give myself a bit more play here. There. Pull this through. We're pretty darn close to showing you what 3 sections of this wall will look like. So yes, it's unfortunate that I have to do multiple, but there's going to be efficiencies. Everything that I do on camera is infinitely slower than it takes to do when you're not talking and walking through the whole process. So I'll probably set up more of an assembly line as well when I do the next few. But getting a few under my belt was important today, just so that I could A, identify if the process was going to work, to find some efficiencies in the process, which is always good. These 2 mil guys are just a pain to get through. I'm reluctant to make the hole any bigger because I want to make it, I want to have it rigid. All right, there we go. So that is what 3 of those are going to look like. And again, as you flex more and more to go around the curvature of this, it's gonna look like that. It's gonna retain it, and so you can see that, you know, it's not impossible to flex that, and that piping holds really nice and true. So if I bring you over here to the corner as we finish up here for the day, I'm gonna do that last cut and then talk a little bit about what we do from here going forward. And for those that are going to join in the journey, let me just grab the stand here. I'll bring you over to this corner. There you go. So this won't be the final placement. This is effectively what we're going to, let me slide this in there. There we go. So we get some, this piece, and this piece. When we get those in place, it'll be hard for me to hold everything, but that's effectively what it's going to look like. So hopefully that translates well onto the camera for you guys. You know, and I think that's going to look pretty cool, especially with like all the bottom portion where those white flat areas are. We'll definitely get a lot more design features in there. And you know, if we run this along the side, if we're running it more in a straight portion, it's going to look something like that. And so if we let's grab a Wookiee warrior here, just for perspective. We'll grab a clone trooper as well. You can see that you know, the varying heights. It's still definitely a playable look for the guys as they set up. So it's not anything that's going to be super out of scale. It's not like it's going to be hard to envision. Grab ourselves the hut so you guys can see that the hut still plays well enough in terms of size, and so we didn't really dwarf anything there. The building itself is still elevated enough, and so it stays above that. The eye line of the building is above that. The figs can still interact and move around there. So I'm quite pleased with how that looks. It's going to be much more fancy when we get all the portions done in here. As I said, we'll do some venting, some paneling. We'll do the occasional channel door where the doors would open and the floodwaters would move in and out. So that's still to come as well. So look forward to all of that. So let's jump back over here just for the final few minutes of video as we finish up the final bits of the build, and we'll do that last panel. I'm gonna just tease this out. So, all right. So we have one done. We probably have to make, realistically, we have 3 short ones to do. Then we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'd say 9 total. And so really there's 3 done, so a third done already in terms of getting the base structure in. And then the short ones will be half the amount of work. And so that should speed up as well. And then these are definitely the most pieces in terms of getting them done. Everything else is kind of working flat canvas on flat canvas. So these are very 3-dimensional in shape and have a lot of layering to get them constructionally or like structurally sound. The other pieces are going to be, I guess, just decoration. They're just going to be glued onto the front. So a little bit of foam work to do underneath because I'm going to have like an angled portion just to sell the look of these a bit more. So if you go back to the original look, they kind of are tapered in the sense. So if I go back to that image here, they're actually tapered near the bottom portion of that, and so I want to achieve that look as well. So hey Travis, I'm only going to be on for a little bit more, but welcome. Definitely encourage you to go check out the video. So we were just working on making the floodgate wall. Okay, so that's now done in there. We're gonna have to do a little bit of trimming on this side, so we'll trim that up, and of course we need to trim along here, and we need to trim along the bottom. So I'm gonna do the bottom first. The bars and the panels. So I'm using polystyrene for the bars, and so this is 3/16 hollow tubing, and so that's going to be one of the pipes. Then I'm using 2mm solid rod, and that's going to be for the other pipe, and so that's the 2 pipe sizes. And then so what we're doing, Travis, today is we're constructing from these foam. From these foam blanks here, we're actually constructing these plastic card portions here, and that's actually what the tubing's going to run through. So these are our struts that are going to go along that wall. So that's what we worked on today. All right, so I'm just going to cut this. There we go. Nice and flush. I'm going to do the same thing on this bottom one. Just trying to cut this guy through in one fell swoop. Get some gum up on the blade here. No problem. Try to answer all the questions that I can as I see them. I'm just trying to cut through this piece here. See, I'm just about through. I'm just gonna, whoa, careful with my finger there. All right, so then what we're gonna do, nick myself just a teeny bit. There we go. Get blood on my project always. So what we're gonna do now is, let me bring that up to the camera. There, you can see how we got that nice and flush. So what we're gonna do is sand along this portion. You can see my little drop of my blood sweat. No tears, but we're now going to sand this ever so slightly, and then we're going to sand this. I just want to show you guys how you can really make a seam disappear. And I have, thought I had one more sanding stick. Here, I'm certain I did. I'm not seeing it at this very moment. Okay, I'll have to find it later. I have another, just a fine stick. So this is a medium sanding stick, and then I have a fine stick, and then I just am able to smooth those over just a little bit more to get it a bit more flush. But I'm not sure where I set that. But let's cut this last portion, and then we'll show you what it looks like when we're all done here. All right, so just going to run the knife along here to trim this. Coming off quite nicely. There we go. Want to sand this as well. Sanding stick, or as I said, sand it with your paper. All right, let's show you guys that on camera. So there is how that front edge ended up, and you can see effectively we have no seam there, and that's really what we're trying to look for, right? We're trying to get that seam just to disappear. Any of this, like you can see the little grunge in there, that's just a little bit of the adhesive that's picking up, you know, a little bit of the sandpaper residue or what have you. So that effectively is not a seam. It's just a little bit of discoloration, and so that will be that'll be gone. And the idea being that we're trying to, you know, replicate. And so you can see these are all handmade, each one made individually, but let me just line them up here for you. And I think that you'll see, and you'll probably agree, that they're pretty consistent. And that's not anything to do with any skill or anything like that. I'm just saying that we're using the exact same quantifiable measurements every single time, and then we're able to sand and manipulate. And you can see, even from the standpoint of, let me see if I can get this to line up with the camera. Just trying to get it so you guys can see through the, can we get the holes? There we go. So you can see that even that, we're able to align those holes through there, which is quite important. Like that's really what we're trying to achieve. So, well, yes, it'd be great if you could 3D print this, fantastic, but you'd still have to go design it, and then you'd have to 3D print it. And while people could certainly do that, I think the idea being that you could just take this shape later on, figure it out roughly from measurements. I can even provide the exact measurements of what they are. If somebody wants to replicate them, you can go replicate the whole project. For me, I want to do it once as an original, and then I'm okay with whatever people do with it afterwards. But that's kind of what we work on here, what I work on here. And I really like the challenge of getting that stuff done and making everything original. I didn't get this from anywhere. I took it from a concept. I manipulated the concept into something that feasibly worked to something on the table. It fits the parameters that we have. We're going to incorporate it into our design, and then from there, we're going to make it into some sort of conducive project. So, all right, let's jump back on the screen here. Let's end off the Kashyyyk week with some thank yous. Awesome. There we go. Yeah, so I much appreciate everyone coming to hang out this week, all the folks that were here, Al and Travis and Aaron and Bernard and Jace. I know I missed other people that were here. Tommy was here in the week, and we had, lots of people were here all week, so I do appreciate that, hanging out and enjoying some of the time here in the last 9 days or so. So like I said, as you move forward, if you're interested in the Kashyyyk Project, I'll move over. I won't be doing a daily update on Patreon, of course, but I'll be doing probably a weekly update over there in terms of either photos, videos, catching up. I'll break some of the stuff down into more tutorial versions as well, nice clean tutorials, and so that you guys can follow along on those. You can also keep up with the project. I will be staying at the project pretty dedicated here, at least for the next 2 weeks, just because I am going to be home. I still work, but I won't have a travel time, so I'll infinitely gain a couple more hours a day. And I'll be a little less run down at the end of the day, I think, here in the coming weeks. So look for that. All that content will be over there. Like I said, go join up on the Patreon if you are included. That'd be great. Great job. Thanks for answering all my questions. See you on the Legion Academy podcast. Absolutely, Bernard. You'll see me on Wednesday. I'll be over there hanging out with Joe, as I am every week. But I do want to continue on with this because I'm really inspired right now, and I'm trying to contain my excitement to jump around on all the different things that I have coming up for this. So I'll probably stay at these pieces just to get those done, because I think getting this wall in will be really exciting. But I think the next big thing to look for is actually adding in all the ground texture, the ability to bring this table from I'd say a crude three-dimensional landscape into a much more dynamic three-dimensional landscape is going to be the next big thing. When we start laying in that, all the pink will disappear, all the paste will be down, all the cellulose clay will be down, and then we'll actually start getting the rock formations in, the undulating ground cover. You'll start to see a little bit more definitively where that beach is going to be done. We'll get in the ground tracks. We'll get in the craters. I want to put a couple craters on the far side, just sort of work in some of those Kashyyyk elements that we have talked about and shared on some of the other photos. Remembering we talked about looking at this particular photo here. You can see those tank tracks or those crawler tracks in there. Those craters that are in there. Looking at the stepping stones, we have those done. Remember, those are finished. We'll put those in, and we'll get our huts done. There's so much to happen on this project, and like I said, it's not going to happen overnight, but I certainly will make it happen, and I think it'll be an exciting project when we get all done. So if you have any tie to it at all, and you want to pop over to the TheTerrainStudio Patreon and follow along there, I encourage you to do so. If you want, just wait for the photos to be released in public later. So by all means, I'm not going to twist anybody's arms, and I'm certainly not going to hold back on putting the content out later. But I want to have that exclusive perk for those folks that aren't so inclined to support what happens here in the studio. So, all right, folks, sounds like I have a little giddly girl up there, so I'm gonna go hang out and play up there and do my best to impersonate real Wookiee and have some fun time with her. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks for supporting, and I will gladly return any favors I can. And if you have, by all means, if you have questions, feel free to ask. I'm always willing to entertain that stuff. So I will catch you guys in the next one.